The massive crystal towers of Xanthari Prime reached toward the purple sky like fingers of pure light. Inside the tallest spire, 12 different alien species sat around a circular table that seemed to float in the air. Each delegate represented millions of worlds and billions of lives. They had come together for one purpose: to discuss the war against the Void Swarm. Admiral Jake Morrison stood at the center of the room, his blue uniform looking plain compared to the exotic clothing and strange forms around him. His hands trembled slightly as he held a datapad containing Earth's military reports. Behind him, Commander Lisa Brooks watched the alien faces with careful eyes. She had studied each species for months, learning their customs and ways of thinking. The Zephyrians were the first to speak. Their delegate had skin like blue glass and 4 arms that moved in perfect coordination. When he talked, his voice sounded like music played through water. Admiral Morrison, we have reviewed your planet's military capabilities. Your species has barely learned to travel between stars. What could you possibly offer in a war against an enemy that has consumed 40 star systems? Jake felt his jaw tighten, but he kept his voice steady. We may be new to space travel, but humans have been fighting wars for thousands of years. We know how to adapt, how to survive when things look impossible. A harsh clicking sound filled the room. The Thrakari delegate, a creature that looked like a giant insect with armor plating, was making what humans had learned was their version of laughter. His mandibles clicked together as he spoke. Humans have fought wars with primitive weapons against other humans. We have fought wars across galaxies for millions of years. Your entire species would not fill a single battalion in our armies. Captain Ryan Hayes, who had been standing silently near the wall, stepped forward. His face was red with anger, but his voice remained calm. Size isn't everything. Sometimes a small force can accomplish what a large one cannot. The ethereal collective's representative began to glow brighter inside her crystal shell. She was a being of pure energy, and when she spoke, her words came as harmonic sounds that the translation devices turned into speech. Humans are too aggressive, too unpredictable. Our war efforts require perfect coordination. Your species would disrupt our carefully planned strategies. Dr. Emma Watson, Earth's leading expert on alien psychology, moved closer to the table. She had spent years studying how different species thought and made decisions. Perhaps unpredictability could be an advantage. The Void Swarm adapts to your tactics because they are always the same. Humans could provide something different. Tall, thin being with silver skin and 3 eyes spoke next. The Kuvani delegate's voice was cold and mechanical. Different is not necessarily better. We have mathematical models that prove our current strategies are optimal. Adding random elements would only create chaos. The Xanthari Prime Minister, whose species hosted this meeting, stood up from his seat. His people looked almost human, except for their golden skin and the way their eyes changed color when they felt strong emotions. Right now, his eyes were shifting from blue to red, showing his frustration. The Void Swarm has already consumed the Outer Rim territories. Every day we delay, more worlds fall. We cannot afford to waste time on untested allies. Lisa Brooks activated her datapad and holographic images filled the air above the table. These are tactical analyses of every major battle in the past. 2 years, the Swarm learns from each encounter. They study your weapons, your ship movements, your communication patterns. Each victory you achieve makes them stronger. The room fell silent as the delegates studied the images. The data showed clear patterns of adaptation and evolution in the enemy's tactics. Jake seized the moment. This is why you need us. We don't think like you do. We don't follow the same patterns. The Swarm can't adapt to what it can't predict. The Thrakari delegate's mandibles clicked again, but this time it sounded annoyed rather than amused. Your logic is flawed. Military success requires discipline, order, and proven tactics. Chaos is not a strategy. A new voice entered the conversation. The Quillian representative, a being that looked like a walking tree with bark for skin, spoke in a voice that sounded like wind through leaves. Perhaps we should consider their offer. The humans showed remarkable resilience during their first contact with our species. The Zephyrian delegate's forearms moved in a dismissive gesture. Resilience against first contact is different from warfare against an enemy that has destroyed civilizations older than their entire planet. Jake felt his patience wearing thin. You're making the same mistake that every enemy humanity has ever faced made. You're underestimating us because we're different, because we're new. But being new means we haven't learned your limitations yet. The ethereal collective's representative pulsed with brighter energy. Limitations exist for good reasons. They prevent unnecessary casualties and wasted resources. Your species has a reputation for taking foolish risks. Dr. Watson stepped forward again. Sometimes foolish risks are the only way to achieve impossible victories. Human history is full of examples where desperate situations led to creative solutions. The debate continued for hours. Each human representative presented their case with growing passion, while the alien delegates remained unmoved. They spoke of their advanced technology, their centuries of military experience, their perfect coordination between species. The humans talked about adaptability, creativity, and the power of desperation. Finally, the Xanthari Prime Minister called for a vote. One by one, each species cast their decision. The Zephyrians voted no. The Thrakari voted no. The Ethereal Collective voted no. Every single delegate rejected humanity's offer to join the war effort. The Prime Minister's eyes had turned deep red as he announced the decision. The Galactic Council has voted unanimously to deny Earth's request for military participation. Humanity will maintain defensive positions around your home system, while the member species handle the Void Swarm threat. Jake Morrison felt something cold settle in his stomach. Lisa Brooks clenched her fist so tightly her knuckles turned white. Ryan Hayes looked like he wanted to punch something. Emma Watson just stared at the alien delegates with sad, knowing eyes. As the human delegation prepared to leave, the Corvani delegate spoke one final time. Do not take this personally, humans. This decision is based on logical analysis of your capabilities. Perhaps in a few centuries, when your species has matured, you will be ready to join us. The journey back to Earth felt longer than usual. Jake Morrison sat in his command chair, staring out at the stars. Lisa Brooks worked on her reports, but her mind kept returning to the dismissive looks on the alien faces. Ryan Hayes paced the ship's corridors, his anger still burning bright. When they finally reached Earth, President Helen Clark was waiting for them in the Situation Room. Her face was calm, but Jake could see the tension in her shoulders. How did it go? Jake shook his head. They don't want our help. They think we're too primitive, too chaotic, too unpredictable. The president was quiet for a long moment. Then she stood up and walked to the window that looked out over the city. They may not want our help now, but they'll need it eventually. And when they do, we'll be ready. Lisa Brooks looked up from her reports. What should we do in the meantime? President Clark turned back to face them. We prepare, we train. We learn everything we can about this enemy. And we wait for the moment when they realize they were wrong about us. Outside the window, the lights of the city twinkled like stars. Somewhere out there, beyond the reach of Earth's defenses, an ancient enemy was consuming worlds. The galaxy's most advanced species were going to war without humanity's help. They thought they didn't need humans. Time would prove them wrong. 6 months had passed since the Galactic Council rejected Earth's offer to join the war. From the command center deep inside Cheyenne Mountain, General Marcus Webb watched the distant battle reports with growing concern. The massive screens showed star maps covered in red zones where the Void Swarm had attacked and blue zones where the Alien Alliance claimed victory. Lieutenant Amy Foster sat at her monitoring station, tracking enemy movements across 17 different star systems. Her fingers moved quickly across the holographic controls as she processed data from the Alliance's own communication networks. The aliens had not cut Earth off completely from their information systems, perhaps because they thought humans were too primitive to understand what they were seeing. General, the Zephyrian fleet just destroyed another swarm hive in the Kepler system, Amy reported, her voice carrying a mix of admiration and worry. Their ships can phase through solid matter, so the swarm's weapons can't touch them. Colonel Steve Parker leaned over her shoulder to study the tactical display. He had been analyzing alien military doctrine for months, trying to understand how each species fought. Zephyrians are impressive, but look at this pattern. They always attack from the same angle, always use the same formation. It's like they're following a textbook. On another screen, Commander Lisa Brooks watched footage of Thrakari warriors in combat. The insect-like beings were each the size of a small building, their biomechanical armor making them nearly invincible. One warrior could destroy an entire human battalion, yet they moved with perfect coordination across the battlefield. "They're winning," Lisa said, but her tone suggested she wasn't entirely convinced. "The Thrakari just liberated the Vega colony. Their bioweapons are incredibly effective against swarm technology." General Webb nodded, but his expression remained troubled. "They're winning battles, but something doesn't feel right. Steve, show me the analysis of their combat patterns." Steve activated a new display that showed battle formations and tactical movements from dozens of engagements. Every species fights exactly the same way in every battle. Zephyrians always phase attack from the flanks. The Thrakari always charge head-on with their bio-warriors. The Ethereal Collective always coordinates from the rear with perfect timing. Dr. Emma Watson entered the command center carrying a stack of research files. She had been studying the psychological profiles of each alien species, trying to understand how they thought and made decisions. "I've been analyzing their military history. These tactics have worked for them for thousands of years. They see no reason to change?" Amy looked up from her station, her young face showing confusion. "But if their tactics work, why are you all so worried?" Dr. Watson sat down at an empty console and began pulling up her research. "Because the Void Swarm is different from any enemy they faced before. My analysis shows that the swarm doesn't just fight back, it learns. Every battle provides it with new data about how each species operates." The main screen shifted to show a new battle report. The Zenthari had deployed their quantum weapons against a swarm fleet near the Proxima system. The weapons could unmake matter at the molecular level, turning enemy ships into empty space. The battle was a complete victory for the Alliance. "See?" Amy said, pointing at the screen. "The Zenthari weapons are incredible. The swarm didn't even get close to their ships." Lisa Brooks frowned as she studied the aftermath footage. "Amy, look at the swarm ships that escaped. Do you see anything different about them?" Amy enhanced the image and gasped. The surviving swarm vessels had new armor plating that seemed to shimmer with an energy field. "They're already adapting to the quantum weapons." Colonel Parker pulled up historical data from earlier battles. "This is what I've been afraid of. Look at these energy signatures from 3 months ago, then compare them to last week's battles. The swarm is evolving its technology based on what it encounters." Dr. Watson's fingers flew over her keyboard as she accessed her psychological profiles. The Alliance species are too rigid in their thinking. They've been using the same strategies for millennia because those strategies always worked. But the swarm is learning from their predictability. General Webb stood up and walked to the large tactical display. "We need to warn them. Send a message to the Galactic Council explaining what we've discovered." "Already tried, sir," Amy said sadly. The Corvani delegate replied that human analysis was insufficient for galactic level strategic planning. "They think we're too primitive to understand what we're seeing." The next few weeks brought a series of spectacular victories for the Alliance. The Korthik species deployed their moon-sized dreadnoughts against a major swarm stronghold. Each dreadnought carried enough firepower to destroy a planet, and they swept through the enemy formations like giants crushing insects. Captain Ryan Hayes watched the battle from Earth's Deep Space Monitoring Station. His ship, the Defender, was positioned at the edge of human space, officially to guard against swarm attacks, but really to observe the war. "Those Korthak ships are amazing. Each one must have a crew of millions." His communications officer, Lieutenant Ben Clark, shook his head in wonder. I can't imagine building something that big. The engineering must be incredible. Ryan studied the tactical readouts more carefully. Ben, look at how they're attacking. Same formation as always, same approach vector, same weapon deployment sequence. They're like a machine. Well, it's working, Ben replied. The swarm is retreating from 3 different systems. But Ryan's experience as a military commander told him something different. No, Ben, they're not retreating. They're regrouping. And they're learning. Back on Earth, the human leadership watched as the Alliance established what they called the Superiority Protocols. The document was transmitted to every known species in the galaxy, including Earth. Dr. Watson read it aloud to the assembled staff. The Galactic Council hereby establishes that primitive species lacking advanced technology and proven military doctrine shall not be permitted to participate in galactic-level conflicts. Such participation would endanger the lives of superior beings and compromise the effectiveness of established tactical systems. The room fell silent. General Webb's jaw tightened as he processed the implications. They're not just rejecting our help. They're making it official policy that species like us should never be allowed to fight alongside them. Lisa Brooks slammed her hand on the table. Superior beings? They think they're better than us because they have fancier weapons and older civilizations? Colonel Parker was studying the latest battle reports when something caught his attention. General, you need to see this. The swarm just used a new type of weapon against the ethereal collective. It's some kind of jamming technology that disrupts their hive mind communication. Dr. Watson looked up from her psychological profiles. That's impossible. The ethereal collective's communication system is based on quantum entanglement. It can't be jammed. Amy enhanced the sensor data from the battle. It's not traditional jamming. The swarm is using the collective's own communication. Frequencies against them, creating feedback loops that overload their neural networks. The implications hit everyone at once. The swarm wasn't just learning about weapons and tactics. It was learning about the fundamental nature of how each species operated. It was studying their biology, their psychology, their most basic methods of communication and coordination. They're in trouble, General Webb said quietly. The Alliance doesn't realize it yet, but they're in serious trouble. Over the following months, the victories continued but became more costly. Zephyrians started losing ships when the swarm developed phase-tracking technology. The Thrakari bio-warriors began malfunctioning when exposed to new swarm-viral agents. The ethereal collective's perfect coordination became sporadic as communication disruptions increased. Captain Hayes filed report after report detailing the increasing sophistication of swarm tactics. Each document was ignored or dismissed by the Alliance command structure. The alien species were too confident in their superiority to listen to warnings from primitive humans. Sir, Amy said one evening as she reviewed the latest intelligence, the swarm just defeated a combined Zephyrian-Thrakari fleet in the Volf system. It's their first major victory against Alliance forces. General Webb looked at the casualty reports. Thousands of alien lives lost because they couldn't adapt to an enemy that was learning from their every move. Send another message to the Galactic Council. Tell them that the swarm's learning rate is accelerating. The reply came back within hours. The Kovani delegate's message was brief and condescending. Human concerns are noted but deemed irrelevant to galactic strategic planning. Primitive species should focus on their own defense rather than attempting to advise their superiors. Dr. Watson closed her research files and looked around the room. They're not going to listen. Their pride won't let them admit that they might need help from a species they consider inferior. Colonel Parker was already working on contingency plans. Then we prepare for the inevitable. When their rigid tactics fail completely, when their superior technology isn't enough, they'll have no choice but to ask for our help. And when they do, Lisa Brooks asked. General Webb turned to face his team. When they do, we'll be ready. But we'll do it our way. The alarms in Earth's command center had been blaring for 3 hours straight. Lieutenant Amy Foster sat hunched over her monitoring station, her face pale as she tracked the disaster unfolding in the Helix Nebula. The Zephyrian fleet, once considered invincible with their phase technology, was being systematically destroyed by an enemy that had learned to counter their greatest advantage. "General Webb, you need to see this," Amy called out, her voice tight with stress. "The swarm has deployed some kind of phase negation field. The Zephyrian ships can't phase through matter anymore. They're trapped in normal space." General Marcus Webb rushed to her station, followed closely by Dr. Emma Watson and Colonel Steve Parker. The tactical display showed blue dots representing Zephyrian vessels being overwhelmed by red markers that indicated swarm forces. One by one, the blue dots were disappearing. "How many ships?" Webb asked, though he dreaded the answer. 1,200 Zephyrian vessels entered the nebula 6 hours ago," Amy replied, her fingers trembling as she updated the casualty count. "Only 200 are still responding to communication attempts." Dr. Watson pulled up her analysis files. "On the Zephyrian military doctrine, they've used the same phase attack strategy for over 3,000 years. The swarm has had 18 months to study their tactics. This was inevitable." Colonel Parker enhanced the battle footage on the main screen. "Look at how the swarm is attacking. They're not just countering the phase technology, they're using it against the Zephyrians. Those energy fields are forcing their ships to phase randomly, causing them to materialize inside asteroids or each other." The room fell silent as they watched the ancient and proud Zephyrian fleet being annihilated. These were beings who had mastered reality-bending technology when humans were still living in caves. Now they were dying because they couldn't adapt to an enemy that learned from every encounter. "Commander." Lisa Brooks entered the command center carrying an urgent message from the Galactic Council. Her face was grim as she handed the datapad to General Webb. "The Thrakari Home Defense Fleet just suffered a similar fate. The swarm has developed some kind of bioweapon that turns their own warriors against them." Webb read the report with growing horror. The Thrakari biomechanical warriors, each one equivalent to a human battalion, had been reprogrammed by swarm infiltration codes. The mighty insect warriors had turned on their own ships, tearing them apart from the inside before self-destructing. "Sir," Amy said, her voice barely above a whisper, "I'm receiving a distress signal from the Ethereal Collective. Their communication network is being jammed by some kind of quantum interference." Dr. Watson immediately began analyzing the data. "The swarm is using their own communication frequencies against them. It's creating feedback loops that are overloading their neural networks. Without their hive mind coordination, they're just individual energy beings trying to fight a war they've never had to fight alone." The implications were staggering. In less than a week, the Void Swarm had neutralized the 3 most powerful military forces in the galaxy. The beings who had dismissed humanity as too primitive were now facing extinction because they were too predictable. Captain Ryan Hayes contacted Earth from his position at the edge of human space. His ship, the Defender, had been monitoring swarm movements and reporting back to command. "General, the swarm isn't just adapting to individual species anymore. It's learning to coordinate attacks against multiple targets simultaneously." "What do you mean?" Webb asked, though he suspected he already knew. The attack on the Zephyrians wasn't random. It happened at the exact moment the Thrakari were launching their counteroffensive. The swarm timed everything perfectly to catch the Alliance when they were most vulnerable. Colonel Parker pulled up strategic maps showing swarm movements across the galaxy. The enemy is thinking several steps ahead now. They're not just reacting to Alliance tactics, they're predicting them. A new alarm sounded, indicating an urgent message from the Galactic Council. Amy opened the communication channel, and the holographic image of the Xanthari Prime Minister appeared in the center of the room. His golden skin looked pale, and his eyes were shifting rapidly between colors, showing his extreme distress. "People of Earth," he began, his voice shaking, "the Galactic Council emergency session has concluded. We are requesting immediate military consultation from your species." The human leadership exchanged glances. After months of being dismissed as primitive and irrelevant, they were finally being asked for help. But the request came with conditions that showed the aliens still didn't understand the true nature of their problem. We require your military analysts to review our tactical databases and suggest improvements to our existing strategies, the Prime Minister continued. Your input will be evaluated by our Strategic Planning Committee and implemented if deemed suitable. General Webb stepped forward. Prime Minister, with respect, that's not how we can help you. The swarm has learned to counter your existing strategies because they're too predictable. We need to develop completely new approaches. The Prime Minister's eyes flashed red with anger. Our strategies have protected the galaxy for millennia. We simply need to refine them, not abandon them entirely. Dr. Watson moved closer to the holographic display. Prime Minister, the swarm has adapted to your military doctrines because they follow consistent patterns. Every species in the Alliance fights the same way in every battle. The enemy has turned your greatest strength, your consistency, into your greatest weakness. Impossible, the Prime Minister replied. Military discipline requires consistent application of proven tactics. Chaos is not a strategy. Colonel Parker activated a tactical display showing the last 6 months of battle data. Look at these patterns. The Zephyrians always attack from the same angle. The Thrakari always charge straight ahead. The Ethereal Collective always coordinates from the rear. The swarm has learned to predict your moves before you make them. The Prime Minister studied the data for several minutes, his eyes gradually changing from red to blue as understanding dawned. You're suggesting we abandon thousands of years of military development in favor of random actions? Not random, Lisa Brooks interjected. Adaptive. Humans have survived as a species because we can change our tactics based on the situation. We don't follow rigid doctrines when they're not working. A new voice joined the conversation as the Corvani delegate appeared on the screen. His 3 eyes were focused intently on the human officers. Your proposal would require Alliance forces to abandon their training and follow human tactical guidance. This is unacceptable. Amy looked up from her station with fresh intelligence reports. Sir, the swarm just launched simultaneous attacks on 5 different star systems. They're using tactics specifically designed to counter each species' defensive patterns. The tactical display updated to show the new battles. In each system, the swarm was employing different strategies perfectly, tailored to exploit the weaknesses of the defending species. The attacks were coordinated with mathematical precision. They're not just learning anymore, Webb said grimly. They're teaching themselves to think like each species, to predict every possible move based on established patterns. Dr. Watson pulled up her psychological profiles of the alien species. The problem is deeper than tactics. Each species has been shaped by millions of years of evolution and thousands of years of military tradition. They literally cannot think outside their established patterns. The Kovani delegate's mechanical voice cut through the discussion. We cannot abandon our nature. We are what we are because of our consistency and discipline. Then you'll lose, Colonel Parker said bluntly. The swarm has learned to counter everything you are. Unless you're willing to become something different, something unpredictable, you'll be extinct within a year. The Prime Minister's holographic form flickered as emergency signals interrupted the communication. We are receiving reports of swarm breakthroughs in 17 systems. Our outer defenses are collapsing. Captain Hayes' voice crackled through the communication system. General, I'm tracking massive swarm movements toward the core systems. They're not just attacking randomly anymore. They're implementing a coordinated strategy to cut off the Alliance's main supply lines. The reality of the situation finally seemed to hit the alien leaders. The Kovani delegate's 3 eyes blinked. In rapid succession, a sign of extreme stress in his species. What do you propose? General Webb looked around at his team, seeing the same grim determination in their faces. We propose a joint operation. Human commanders work alongside your forces, but with authority to override traditional tactical decisions, when necessary. Impossible, the Prime Minister said immediately. Our forces cannot be commanded by a primitive species. Then enjoy extinction, Lisa Brooks said coldly. Because that's where your pride is leading you. The communication channel went silent for several minutes. In the background, emergency alarms could be heard from the alien command centers as more systems fell to the swarm's adaptive tactics. Finally, the Prime Minister spoke again. The Galactic Council will consider your proposal, but understand that any human involvement must be limited and supervised. After the communication ended, the human leadership stood in their command center. 3 years had passed since the war began, and the crystal spires of Xanthari Prime no longer gleamed with their former glory. The once proud towers were darkened and scarred, their surfaces cracked from debris that had fallen from battles fought in the planet's upper atmosphere. Inside the emergency council chamber, 12 species gathered in what many believed would be their final meeting. The Zephyrian delegate sat slumped in his floating chair, his blue skin now pale and transparent from exhaustion. His forearms trembled as he spoke, his musical voice now harsh and broken. We have lost 70% of our fleet. Our phase technology is useless. The swarm predicts our every move before we make it. Across the chamber, the Thrakari representative clicked his mandibles in what humans had learned was their expression of despair rather than laughter. His armor plating was cracked and stained with the fluids that leaked from his wounds. Our bio-warriors turn against us within minutes of engaging the enemy. The swarm has learned to corrupt our most sacred technologies. The ethereal collectives. Representative flickered weakly inside her crystal shell. Her once bright energy form was dim and unstable as she struggled to maintain coherence without her species' hive mind network. We can no longer coordinate our actions. The swarm's interference has isolated us from each other. We fight as individuals now, and we are failing. The Xanthari Prime Minister stood at the head of the table, his golden skin now dull and his eyes permanently shifted to the deep red of defeat. The proud leader who had once dismissed humanity as primitive now looked like a broken shadow of his former self. 40% of known space has fallen to the void swarm. Our core worlds are under direct threat. On Earth, General Marcus Webb watched the emergency council session through intercepted communications. The aliens had become so desperate that they no longer bothered to encrypt their transmissions. Lieutenant Amy Foster sat beside him, monitoring swarm movements that showed the enemy advancing on 3 major fronts simultaneously. They're completely surrounded, Amy reported, her voice filled with a mixture of pity and frustration. The swarm has cut off their supply lines and isolated their remaining fleets. It's only a matter of time now. Dr. Emma Watson looked up from her analysis of the alien psychological profiles. Look at how they're still trying to coordinate their response. Even now, facing extinction, they're following the same rigid command structure that got them into this mess. The Corvani delegate's mechanical voice echoed through the council chamber as he presented his mathematical models. Our probability calculations show a 0% chance of victory using current tactics. We must consider previously unthinkable options. Commander Lisa Brooks leaned forward in her chair, studying the alien faces on the screen. They're finally admitting that their way isn't working. But watch their body language. They're still not ready to truly change. The Quillian representative, whose tree-like bark was now blackened and withered, spoke in a voice like wind through dead leaves. Perhaps we should reconsider the human offer. Their tactical analysis has proven accurate in predicting swarm adaptations. A long silence filled the chamber. The species that had once laughed at humanity's primitive technology now faced the reality that their advanced civilizations were on the verge of extinction. The swarm had learned to counter every weapon, every strategy, every advantage they possessed. The Thrakari delegate was the first to speak. We rejected their military participation because we considered them inferior, but our superiority has led us to defeat. On her monitoring station, Amy detected an incoming transmission from the Galactic Council. She looked up at General Webb. With surprise? Sir, we're receiving an official communication. It's marked as highest priority. The main screen activated, showing the Xanthari Prime Minister flanked by representatives from all 12 species. Their proud postures had been replaced by obvious desperation. The Prime Minister's eyes shifted from red to blue as he struggled to control his emotions. People of Earth, he began, his voice lacking the authority it once held. The Galactic Council formally requests immediate military assistance from the United Earth Defense Force. General Webb stood up slowly, feeling the weight of the moment. Behind him, his entire command staff had gathered to witness this historic communication. The species that had dismissed them as too primitive were now begging for their help. "We understand that our previous rejection of your offered assistance was premature," the Prime Minister continued, the words obviously painful for him to speak. "We are prepared to grant your military advisors limited operational authority." Dr. Watson shook her head sadly. "They still don't understand. They think this is about adding human advisors to their existing command structure." The ethereal collective's representative flickered as she spoke. "Your species' unpredictable nature may provide tactical advantages that our coordinated approaches lack. We are willing to incorporate random elements into our strategies." Colonel Steve Parker stepped forward. "They want to use our unpredictability as a tool within their rigid system. They're still trying to control chaos instead of embracing it." General Webb activated the communication system. "Prime Minister, we appreciate your request for assistance. However, our help comes with conditions that may be difficult for you to accept." The alien leader's eyes flashed with their old arrogance before settling back into desperate blue. "What conditions?" "Complete tactical authority for human commanders in all joint operations. No oversight committees, no strategic review boards, no interference with our methods," Webb stated firmly. "We fight this war our way, or we don't fight it at all." The chamber erupted in angry clicks, harmonic protests, and shifting colors as the alien delegates reacted to the human demands. The Corvani delegate's 3 eyes blinked rapidly as he processed the implications. "You are asking us to surrender military command to a species that has never fought a galactic-scale war. We're asking you to trust a species that has survived every challenge by adapting and thinking creatively." Lisa Brooks interjected. "Your galactic-scale experience has led you to near extinction." Captain Ryan Hayes joined the communication from his position at the edge of human space. "Prime Minister, my scouts report that the swarm is massing for a final assault on your core systems. You have maybe weeks before they reach your homeworlds." The weight of that information settled over the alien delegates like a death shroud. The Zephyrian delegate spoke first, his voice barely audible. "If we grant you complete tactical authority, how do we know you won't simply sacrifice our remaining forces?" Dr. Watson moved closer to the communication screen. "Because humans don't abandon their allies. We may be primitive by your standards, but we understand loyalty and sacrifice. We'll fight for your survival as hard as we'd fight for our own." The Prime Minister looked around at his fellow delegates, seeing the same desperate resignation in their faces. "The Council must vote on this matter. Then vote quickly," General Webb said. "Every hour you delay gives the swarm more time to adapt to whatever desperate measures you're planning next." The voting process that had once taken hours of formal debate now lasted only minutes. One by one, the species that had considered themselves superior to humanity cast their votes for survival over pride. The final tally was unanimous. The Galactic Council grants complete tactical authority to human military commanders for all operations against the Void Swarm, the Prime Minister announced, his voice hollow with defeat. We place our fate in your hands." After the communication ended, the Human Command Center buzzed with activity as staff began preparing for the largest military operation in human history. General Webb turned to address his team. "They're giving us authority, but they don't trust us yet. We'll have to prove ourselves in battle before they truly accept our methods." Amy pulled up strategic displays showing swarm positions throughout the galaxy. "Sir, the enemy has grown incredibly sophisticated. They've been learning from the aliens for 3 years. They'll be studying us too." Colonel Parker was already working on tactical plans that would have horrified the alien military minds. "That's fine, let them study us. The more they try to predict human behavior, the more confused they'll become." Dr. Watson closed her alien psychology files and opened new documents labeled Human Military Psychology. "The aliens are about to learn something the swarm can't adapt to human stubbornness, creativity, and our complete refusal to accept that any situation is hopeless. Commander Brooks looked out at the stars, knowing that somewhere among them, the remnants of 12 proud civilizations were waiting for humanity to save them. They thought they didn't need us. Now they're about to discover what humans can do when we're fighting for something bigger than ourselves. The preparations began immediately. Earth's military forces mobilized for a war unlike anything in human history. They would face an enemy that had learned to counter every conventional tactic, using methods that would shock and terrify their alien allies. But for the first time in 3 years, there was hope in the galaxy, because humans were about to show the universe what happened when an unstoppable force met an unpredictable object. The first human ship to enter Void Swarm territory was not the massive dreadnought the aliens expected. Instead, Lieutenant Amy Foster commanded a small scout vessel called the Defiance, leading a fleet of only 12 ships into the Kepler 442 system where the swarm had established a major staging area. "This is insane," whispered Lieutenant Ben Clark, her communications officer, as they watched the sensor readings. "There are over 300 swarm vessels in this system. Our entire fleet could fit inside one of their larger ships." Amy smiled grimly as she studied the tactical display. Her orders from General Webb had been simple but shocking: attack in a way that made no military sense. "Ben, send the signal. All ships execute pattern chaos." What happened next would have horrified any traditional military commander. The human fleet split apart, with each ship heading in a completely different direction. Some ships flew straight toward the largest swarm vessels, while others retreated toward the system's edge. 3 ships began spinning wildly while firing their weapons in random directions. From his command ship orbiting Earth, Captain Ryan Hayes watched the battle through long-range sensors. The swarm doesn't know what to make of it. Look at their formation. They're trying to respond to 12 different threats simultaneously. The Void Swarm had spent 3 years learning to predict alien tactics. When the Zephyrians attacked, they always came from the flanks using phase technology. When the Thrakari charged, they moved in perfect formation with bio-warriors leading the assault. But the humans were doing everything wrong according to established military doctrine. Amy's ship, the Defiance, suddenly stopped spinning and accelerated directly toward a swarm command vessel. Just when collision seemed certain, she ordered full reverse and fired all weapons at point-blank range before fleeing in the opposite direction. The swarm ship, programmed to adapt to predictable attack patterns, had no response ready for such chaotic behavior. "Lieutenant Foster, what are you doing?" came the horrified voice of the Zephyrian Admiral Kethfer, who was monitoring the battle from the Alliance Command Center. "Your tactics violate every principle of space combat." "Exactly," Amy replied, ordering her ship to suddenly change course again. "The swarm has learned your principles. Time to teach it some new ones." Back on Earth, Dr. Emma Watson was analyzing the psychological impact of human tactics on the enemy. Her research had revealed something remarkable about human behavior under pressure. "General Webb, look at these readings. The swarm's central processing nodes are overloading. They're trying to predict our next move, but there is no pattern to predict." Colonel Steve Parker was coordinating the overall strategy from the command center. "The key is that we're not just being random. Amy and her pilots are responding to battlefield conditions in real time, making decisions based on instinct and immediate tactical opportunities." The breakthrough came when Amy's ship encountered a group of swarm vessels that had been adapted specifically to counter Thrakari bioweapons. The enemy ships launched virus-laden projectiles designed to corrupt biological systems. But Amy wasn't flying a biomechanical ship, and her human crew wasn't connected to any hive mind network. "They're using the wrong weapons," Ben observed as the swarm projectiles passed harmlessly through their shields. "Their adaptive protocols are based on fighting the Alliance species." Amy saw the opportunity immediately. "All ships target the vessels using bioweapons. They've adapted to fight insects, not humans." The human fleet converged on the confused swarm ships and destroyed them within minutes. The victory sent shockwaves through both the Alliance and the Swarm networks. For the first time in 3 years, the enemy had been caught completely off guard. The Void Swarm's learning algorithms, so effective against predictable alien tactics, were useless against human adaptability. Commander Lisa Brooks took command of the next operation, leading a larger human force into the Vega system. Her approach was even more unconventional than Amy's. Instead of attacking the swarm's military targets, she ordered her ships to focus on what appeared to be unimportant: support vessels. "Commander, those ships aren't even armed," protested Captain Jake Morrison, commanding one of the escort vessels. "Why aren't we attacking their battleships?" "Because those support ships are probably more important than they look," Lisa replied. "Humans learned long ago that you don't just fight the enemy's weapons. You fight their ability to use those weapons." Her instinct proved correct. The seemingly harmless support vessels were actually the swarm's mobile adaptation centers, where captured alien technology was analyzed and countermeasures developed. By destroying them, the human fleet crippled the enemy's ability to evolve new tactics. The alien observers were stunned. Admiral Kethfer watched the battle recordings repeatedly, trying to understand how humans had identified critical targets that Alliance intelligence had missed for 3 years. "How did they know?" he asked Dr. Watson during an emergency consultation. "Because humans think differently about warfare," she explained. "Your species fight to destroy enemies. Humans fight to win, and sometimes winning means attacking things that don't seem important to others." The third major engagement came when Captain Hayes led a desperate mission to rescue survivors from a failed ethereal collective operation. The energy beings had been trapped in a dead star system, cut off from their communication network and slowly dying as their crystal shells lost power. The logical approach would have been to send a large rescue fleet with heavy escort. Instead, Hayes took only 5 ships and flew directly through the most dangerous part of swarm territory. When questioned about his route, he gave an answer that perfectly captured the human approach to impossible problems. "The swarm expects us to avoid danger, so we're flying straight through it. Sometimes the most dangerous path is actually the safest." His tiny rescue fleet encountered dozens of swarm vessels, but the enemy was positioned to intercept a large rescue operation approaching from a safe direction. The humans slipped through their defenses and evacuated 300 ethereal collective survivors before the swarm could redeploy their forces. Dr. Watson's analysis of these early victories revealed the secret of human military success. "We don't just adapt to situations, we create new situations that force our enemies to adapt to us." The swarm learned to counter alien predictability, but it has no defense against human unpredictability. General Webb began planning larger operations based on these successes. "The aliens fight the way they've always fought because it's worked for them for thousands of years. Humans fight the way we need to fight because we've never had the luxury of overwhelming technological superiority." The psychological impact on the Alliance forces was almost as important as the tactical victories. For 3 years, they had watched their ancient civilizations crumble before an unstoppable enemy. Now they saw their primitive human allies achieving impossible victories, using methods that made no sense according to established military theory. The Thrakari delegate, watching footage of Amy's chaotic attack patterns, clicked his mandibles. And what humans were learning was amazement rather than laughter. "They fight like their entire species is insane." "No," corrected the Xanthari Prime Minister, his eyes shifting to colors the humans had never seen before. "They fight like beings who refuse to accept that any problem cannot be solved." The Void Swarm began showing signs of fundamental confusion. Its adaptive algorithms, designed to learn from consistent patterns, started producing contradictory responses when faced with human tactics. Some swarm vessels began attacking their own forces when their prediction systems generated impossible scenarios. Colonel Parker observed this development with satisfaction. The enemy spent 3 years learning to fight like aliens. Now they have to learn to fight like humans, and that's something no algorithm can predict. As word of human victories spread throughout the galaxy, something unexpected began happening. Among the Alliance forces, Alien commanders started requesting to serve under human leadership, eager to learn tactics that actually worked against the swarm. The war was far from over. But for the first time since it began, the Void Swarm was learning to fear rather than adapt. They had conquered civilizations that followed predictable patterns, but humans refused to follow any pattern at all. Amy Foster, now promoted to commander after her success in the Kepler 442 system, summed up the human approach in a message to Alliance forces. The enemy thinks war is about learning and adapting. We're going to teach them that sometimes war is about being so unpredictable that learning becomes impossible. The galaxy was beginning to understand that they had been fighting the wrong kind of war. They thought victory required superior technology and perfect coordination. Humans were proving that sometimes victory required something far more dangerous: the willingness to embrace chaos and turn it into a weapon. The final battle for the galaxy began in the darkness between stars, where the Void Swarm had built its central nexus. The massive structure was larger than most planets, a writhing mass of metal and energy that consumed entire star systems to fuel its growth. For 4 years, it had been the heart of the enemy's expansion across the galaxy. Admiral Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the newly constructed ship Humanity's Hope, watching as the largest fleet in galactic history assembled around him. Ships from every Alliance species had come together for this desperate assault. But for the first time in the war, human commanders led the operation. "Admiral, we have confirmation from all fleet elements," reported Commander Amy Foster, now serving as Morrison's tactical coordinator. 2,000 ships from 12 different species, all awaiting your orders. Morrison felt the weight of responsibility settle on his shoulders. The aliens who had once dismissed humans as too primitive were now trusting them to save their civilizations. But the plan they had developed would require every species to abandon everything they had learned about warfare. "Commander Brooks, are the alien crews ready for what we're asking them to do?" Morrison asked. Lisa Brooks, now serving as Fleet Operations Commander, checked her reports. "As ready as they can be. Zephyrian pilots are still uncomfortable with random movement patterns, and the Thrakari warriors don't understand why we want them to retreat sometimes. But they're willing to follow human orders." The Void Swarm Nexus detected their approach and began deploying defensive forces. Millions of adapted vessels poured out of the structure, each one designed to counter specific Alliance tactics. The enemy had spent 4 years perfecting counters to every known strategy. They're organizing into formation patterns designed to stop traditional Alliance attacks, observed Captain Ryan Hayes from his command position. "Look at how they're positioning themselves. Perfect counters to Zephyrian phase attacks, Thrakari. Bioweapon assaults and ethereal collective coordination." Dr. Emma Watson, now serving as psychological warfare specialist, smiled grimly. "Exactly what we expected. They're fighting the war they learned to win, not the war we're about to give them." Morrison activated the fleet-wide communication system. "All ships, this is Admiral Morrison. Today we end this war not with superior technology or perfect coordination, but with something the enemy cannot predict or counter: human determination and the willingness of our allies to trust in chaos." The attack began unlike any battle in galactic history. Instead of organized formations and coordinated strikes, the massive fleet scattered in all directions. Zephyrian ships that normally attacked in perfect phase formations began moving randomly. Thrakari bio-warriors abandoned their traditional charge tactics and started retreating and advancing without pattern. "This is madness," whispered the ethereal collective Admiral Shannara, her energy form flickering with anxiety as she watched her ships break their sacred synchronization. "We are abandoning millions of years of military evolution." "Trust us," Amy replied over the communication channel. "Sometimes evolution means forgetting what you used to be and becoming something new." The Void Swarm's response was immediate and catastrophic for the enemy. Their adaptive algorithms, faced with 12 different species, all acting in ways that violated their fundamental nature, began producing contradictory instructions. Swarm vessels started attacking each other. As their targeting systems identified impossible threat patterns, Colonel Steve Parker, coordinating ground assault teams, watched as Thrakari warriors successfully boarded swarm vessels by doing exactly what their training said never to do, approaching without formation, attacking without coordination, and fighting as individuals rather than units. The enemy adapted to fight coordinated bio-warriors, he reported. They have no response ready for individual Thrakari acting on personal initiative. The breakthrough came when Commander Foster led a mixed squadron of human and Zephyrian ships directly into the Nexus's core defenses. Instead of using the Zephyrians' phase technology in its traditional manner, she ordered them to phase randomly while human ships provided covering fire. The Nexus defense grid is trying to track phase patterns that don't exist, Foster reported, her voice tight with excitement. Their targeting systems are overloading. Dr. Watson monitored the psychological impact on the swarm's central intelligence. The Nexus is showing signs of fundamental breakdown. It's trying to process tactical data that makes no sense according to its learning parameters. The alien crews, despite their fear and confusion, began to understand what the humans had taught them. A Xanthari captain named Veltar abandoned his species' traditional quantum weapon patterns and started firing in seemingly random directions. His shots, guided by intuition rather than calculation, found weaknesses in swarm defenses that mathematical precision had missed. "I understand now," Veltar transmitted to the human commanders. "We have been fighting like machines trying to defeat a machine. You taught us to fight like living beings." The decisive moment came when Morrison led a desperate assault directly into the Nexus's central core. The plan violated every principle of military strategy, flying a command ship into the heart of enemy defenses with minimal escort. But the swarm's defenses were positioned to stop a logical attack, not a suicidal one. "Admiral, we're taking massive damage," reported his tactical officer as the ship shook under enemy fire. "Shields are failing. Keep going," Morrison ordered. "The Nexus is trying to analyze our intentions, but there's nothing logical about what we're doing." The final assault involved every ship in the fleet converging on the Nexus from different directions, each one following human tactical guidance that changed moment by moment. The Void Swarm's central intelligence, faced with an enemy that refused to follow any predictable pattern, suffered a cascading system failure. Captain Hayes watched as the massive Nexus began to collapse in on itself. The central intelligence is having what can only be described as a nervous breakdown. Its adaptive algorithms are caught in endless loops trying to predict the unpredictable. The moment of victory came not with a massive explosion, but with a strange silence as the Void Swarm ships simply stopped moving. Across the galaxy, millions of enemy vessels shut down as their connection to the central intelligence was severed. "All swarm vessels have ceased hostile activities," Amy reported, her voice filled with disbelief. "The war is over." In the aftermath, the surviving fleet gathered around the collapsed remains of the Nexus. Representatives from every species transmitted their gratitude to the human commanders who had achieved the impossible. The Zephyrian Admiral Kethver spoke first, his musical voice now filled with respect. "We owe you an apology that can never be adequate. We judged you primitive because you were different, but your difference saved us all." President Helen Clark received the fleet at Earth a month later. The Crystal Chambers of the United Nations building hosted the largest gathering of alien dignitaries in human history as they signed the Treaty of Terra. The Thrakari delegate, his mandibles clicking in what humans now knew was profound gratitude, addressed the assembled crowd. "Today we establish not just peace but a new understanding. The galaxy's strength lies not in our similarities but in our differences." Morrison found himself appointed as the first Supreme Allied Commander, tasked with defending the galaxy against future threats. His first order established the new military doctrine that would govern galactic defense. "All future operations will be planned by mixed-species command teams," he announced. "No single-species tactical doctrine will dominate. We will maintain our diversity of thought as our greatest weapon." Dr. Watson, now head of the new Galactic Strategic Institute, began training alien officers in human military psychology. The lesson of this war is simple, she told her first class of mixed species students. Predictability is a luxury that only works when fighting predictable enemies. Commander Brooks took command of the first integrated exploration fleet tasked with rebuilding the systems devastated by the war. Her ships carried crews from every species, working together in ways that would have been impossible before the war taught them the value of embracing chaos. The galaxy had learned that technological superiority and rigid discipline were not enough to guarantee survival. Sometimes the greatest strength came from the willingness to abandon everything you thought you knew, and trust in the creative chaos of minds that refused to accept defeat. As the human delegation prepared to return to Earth, the Xanthari Prime Minister spoke words that would be remembered throughout galactic history. We thought we were superior because we had mastered order and predictability. You showed us that true superiority lies in mastering change itself. We thought we didn't need humans, but we learned that we needed humanity, not just your species, but your approach to impossible problems. The war was over, but its lessons would echo through the galaxy for generations. 12 species had learned that diversity of thought was not a weakness to be overcome, but a strength to be celebrated. They had discovered that sometimes the best solution to an unsolvable problem was to refuse to accept that it was unsolvable. The Void Swarm had been defeated not by superior weapons or perfect coordination, but by the simple human truth that there was